Okay, we're going to leave our regular programming now and go live to Ankara, where the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is about to hold a joint press conference with his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah El-Sisi. What we're seeing now is the two leaders and their ministers signing a range of joint memoranda of understanding and agreements, possibly up to 20 agreements between the two countries to boost commercial ties, to cooperate on energy, defence, tourism, health, culture and education. The two countries looking to deepen ties and deepen their relationships. Now, this is the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi's first visit to Türkiye since he took office some 10 years ago, and the first Egyptian presidential level visit in 12 years amid a warming of long, strained relations between the two countries. Now, earlier this year, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also visited Cairo as part of this bid to ease relations in the two countries, as you can see, clear to move forward in relations, put their differences aside and work together where they can. Earlier today, President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi was greeted with a guard of honor, military band playing him in as he arrived in Ankara. Yusuf, I'm going to come to you, our editor-at-large, Yusuf Erim, joining me now in the studio. Yusuf, just give us some background on the relations between the two countries, between the two leaders, because it hasn't always been easy.
No, it hasn't always been easy. There was a freeze for about a decade, starting in 2012 to about 2022, when some backdoor diplomacy, some intelligence diplomacy, military to military, the people-to-people relationship was able to provide a safety net where this rapprochement process was able to be launched. And then we've seen Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Sisi talking on occasions on the sidelines of international platforms. That big handshake at the Qatar World Cup was very important as well, where they ran into each other and had a very warm dialogue over there with the Emir of Qatar present as well. And then again, the Erdogan's visit to Egypt was very important, and now the reciprocal visit finally. So this meeting right here that we're seeing is about 3 to 4 years in the making, with a lot of diplomacy to build the foundation for this rapprochement.
Clearly a very positive day today in terms of signing all of these agreements, which is what we're witnessing at the moment. But just take us back, you said, you know, they were strained relations for about a decade. Why was that?
Well, one of the reasons for the strained relationship, both Türkiye and Egypt were on different sides of many political issues, ideological issues. The way Sisi came to power with the military coup in 2012, that didn't play too warmly in Türkiye. Mohamed Morsi, the previous president, was a close friend of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So there was a strained relationship over there. But again, at times like this, you have the people-to-people relationship, you have economic activity, trade relations that provides a safety net. But when we look at the conflicts in the region, whether it's Libya, whether it's Syria, whether it was the blockade of Qatar during the Gulf crisis, Egypt and Türkiye found themselves on different sides. And that just continued to create that geopolitical divide between both. But now that a decade has passed over that, we're seeing both of these leaders. Sisi's been around for over a decade, Erdogan around for over 2 decades.
Can you give us some more detail on what areas those agreements will be in, and where exactly the two countries are striving to get the most benefit out of a closer relationship, Hassan?
That's right. I understand they're signing in total about 17 agreements covering a wide range of areas. So, for example, cooperation when it comes to the tourism sector, transportation, technology, defense, and basically what they're aiming at is economic relations that are reflected in bilateral trade volume of about $15 billion a year. That's the target, and it's basically been discussion about how to get there, because at the moment there have been some obstacles. Trade has suffered over the last decade or so. They want to fix that. Of course, they've talked about other issues as well. So they've talked about the situation in occupied Palestinian territories, particularly around Gaza. That has been a very concerning issue for Egypt, considering the border that Egypt has with Gaza. So they've talked about the areas where they can cooperate in that regard. They've talked about how they can leverage their relations with various countries in the region. Egypt has been interacting with the United States as far as reaching a ceasefire agreement is concerned. Turkey has been engaged in a lot of shuttle diplomacy and other diplomatic initiatives. So they've discussed all that. Ultimately, they're saying that when it comes to relations between the two countries, they want to not only normalize it to the point where it used to be, but really boost these relations. And I think shortly we're going to be hearing this message from the two leaders.
And Hassan, I understand that defence is one area in particular that the two countries are striving to work more closely together, particular interest from Egypt around Turkish-made drones. Is that right?
You're right, absolutely. We've had senior Egyptian military officials who have been coordinating with Turkish military officials. Of course, this has been happening behind the scenes. They've been discussing the Turkish drones. They've been discussing other Turkish technology as well. Remember, just a day before the visit of the Egyptian president, we had a Turkish supersonic trainer jet known as Hurjet, which went to Egypt to participate in an air show, was showing off its capabilities. And I understand that the Egyptians may have taken some interest in that as well. So there's a lot of military hardware that Egyptians believe they could benefit from importing from Türkiye. Türkiye has really ramped up its defense capabilities. It's been cutting down reliance on imports from Western countries in particular. So I think there's that role model that many countries see in the global south as well. They believe that Türkiye has a lot of potential and perhaps they could benefit from that. Technology transfer in some cases, learning from the experience how Türkiye went from a country importing around 80% of its defense needs to a country importing just about 20% over around 2 decades. You know, that's quite a significant development, and this is something that I think many countries are interested in, including Egypt.
And defence, of course, something so important on the international agenda at the moment, not least because of the regional conflict in the Middle East, because of what's going on in Gaza, because of Israel's positioning at the moment. But Gaza is something that in some places Turkey and Egypt agree on, but in others there are differences of opinion. Can you just tease that out a little bit more for us? Why is it? Where are they quite close together, and where are they further apart, and why is that?
Absolutely. Well, when Ankara talks about the situation in Gaza, it says that its primary concern is the humanitarian angle. It's concerned about the nearly 40,000 people who Israel has killed, a very large number of them women and children. In fact, the overwhelming majority of them women and children. So Ankara says that its first concern is that humanitarian concern. Secondly, it's concerned about escalation. It's concerned about countries like Lebanon, Iran being dragged into it, and that regional conflict basically growing out of control. It's going to ultimately pull Türkiye in as well. That there's a security concern for Türkiye. With Egypt, the calculus is slightly different. So Egypt has a border with Gaza. One of its main concerns is that, and when I was in Egypt just a few months ago, I talked to some Egyptian officials. This is not something they say publicly, but they said that at least some of them believe that Israel has been taking all the steps to try and push a very large number of Palestinians into Egyptian territory around the Sinai Peninsula. So they felt that their territorial integrity is also threatened by Israel. So there's that very immediate security threat that Egypt feels. But at the same time, Egypt has relations with Israel, pretty strong relations. Egypt relies quite heavily on US economic aid, which is tied to how Egypt's relations with Israel are. So, you know, when it comes to the area for maneuvering with Egypt, I think it's a bit more constrained than Türkiye. Türkiye has been sort of resorting to various other options. It's not relying on US aid to support its economy. It's strengthened its defense sector so it can afford to be more assertive. That's not the case with Egypt. So, of course, they have very different strategic calculuses, and this is where their priorities emanate from.
Interesting. And Hassan, we're just watching both leaders. We're watching President Erdogan and President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi signing what I imagine to be some of the last of these documents and agreements. What can you tell me about the style of the two leaders? Do they have similar styles? Is their rapport very personal, or is it all very strategic and high level?
Well, as far as personal relations are concerned, they haven't really had very strong personal relations. They've been looking at pragmatic interests. They've been using the economic logic. Both countries, especially when you look at the post-COVID economy, both countries have had a number of challenges to deal with. So they realize that there is a win-win situation to be achieved. They realize that both countries stand to gain with good relations. Let's not forget the historical context. The Turks and Egyptians have relations going back hundreds of years. Before the Republic of Türkiye was founded, from the Ottoman days, there have been very strong relations. Turkey has played a very instrumental role in North Africa and in many parts of the Arabian Peninsula and so forth. So, of course, that factor is there. That cultural bond has been there for hundreds of years. So they're trying to build on that. They've talked about, and I think when we hear the two leaders, they're going to be making a reference to cultural bond between the two peoples, the people-to-people contact.
Okay, Hassan, I'm just going to stop you there, and because we are going to hear right now from Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Most heartfelt sentiments, respect and affection. May God's blessings be upon all of you. First and foremost, I would like to start my words by expressing how pleased I am hosting my dear brother, the President of Egypt, Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, in Ankara. Once again, on behalf of my nation, I would like to welcome him to our capital. His Excellency, Mr. President, during my Cairo visit on the month of February, hosted us quite kindly, and my official visit that I paid to Cairo indeed opened a brand new page in our bilateral relations. From that day onwards, we have preserved our bilateral relations at the highest level possible, and pertaining to the regional matters, we have corresponded quite closely with Egypt. And our relations have been developing in every field. Hopefully, thanks to this visit, our relations will be indeed strengthened even further. As you know, with Egypt, we share quite historical relations. Next year, we will be marking the 100-year anniversary of the establishment of our diplomatic relations with Egypt. We are two countries which hosted civilizations which shaped the history of the humanity. Multidimensional relations between our countries hopefully will be improved even further thanks to our joint efforts and endeavors. We are really pleased with the fact that our efforts and endeavors are yielding positive results. Together with Mr. Sisi, we held tête-à-tête meeting in Cairo, and we have taken the decision of restructuring our high-level strategic cooperation council. And the first meeting of this mechanism of high-level strategic cooperation council was held today. And we have undersigned the joint declaration thanks to this meeting. And thanks to this joint declaration, we will be improving our relations in a variety of fields, including but not limited to education, health, tourism, and defense. And we reaffirmed our will of improving our relations in all those fields. Commerce and economy constitute the most important part and dimension of our bilateral relations. In the last 10 years, Turkey has been one of the top 5 trade partners of Egypt. And we have set forth the target of reaching to a bilateral trade volume of $15 billion in the upcoming 5 years. And we are marching with great determination towards that target. Our businessmen invested approximately $3 billion in the Egyptian economy, contributing to it remarkably. We are encouraging our entrepreneurs to increase and boost their investments in Egypt, and we are also expecting the Egyptian investors to invest in Turkey as well. Starting with natural gas and nuclear energy, we are, of course, improving and developing our cooperation with Egypt in the field of energy. The brotherly Egyptian people show great interest to Turkish language and Turkish culture. In order to develop our cultural relations, of course, we put a lot of efforts and endeavors. This positive momentum in our bilateral relations hopefully will be reflected in the field of tourism. Valuable members of the press, Türkiye and Egypt contribute remarkably to the regional peace. During our meetings, we discussed many regional matters, starting with Gaza, and we have been on the same page of boosting our correspondences in order to tackle all those regional matters. Of course, Palestine has been at the epicenter of our discussions. Turkey and Egypt has a similar stance pertaining to the issue of Palestine. We are working around the clock in order to put an end to this genocide going on for 11 months, and we are working day and night in order to make sure that the humanitarian aid flows to the region without any interruption whatsoever. And we are working for a permanent peace. Approximately 32% of all the humanitarian aid dispatched to Gaza has been sent from Turkey. Together with Turkish Red Crescent and Afat, Egyptian Red Crescent and Egyptian authorities worked and cooperated with our institutions, and I would like to thank them very much for all their efforts and endeavors. Israel prevents humanitarian aid to reach to the region. As a result, Israel commits another crime. Israel bombs the region thousands of times, but they still couldn't break the resistance of the Palestinian people, and they are trying to break this resilience and the resistance of the Palestinian people by preventing food and water reaching to the region. Every civilian in the region dying out of hunger and poverty are dying because of Israel. As you know, Egypt indeed facilitates the negotiations together with United States and Qatar. And via our intelligence force and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are supporting this process. But unfortunately, we still see that the uncompromising stance of Israel goes on. Last but not least, Israel indeed murdered the negotiating party and shows his mentality once again. Once again, we would like to express very clearly that we reject the accusations and the allegations of Netanyahu towards Egypt. In addition to all of those, of course, we are doing our best in order to put additional pressure to the government of Israel. We have also officially made our application of becoming an intervening party to the court case litigated by South Africa at the International Court of Justice. And we are working day and night in order to make sure that those murderers are kept responsible. I said before, the murderers of 40,000 civilians do not belong to the parliaments, but they belong to the courthouses in which they will be kept accountable for all the crimes they perpetrated. We are reminding the international community about their responsibilities, but unfortunately, some of the countries in the world still provide unconditional support to Israel, becoming perpetrators themselves and partners in crime. So Netanyahu government puts the whole world into jeopardy. So in order to put an end to this genocide, unfortunately, important steps should be taken, but those steps are not taken so far. So this is not an acceptable situation, and everyone should understand that. We should prevent Israel from aggravating the situation in the region, and this will only be possible if those ambivalent policies are dropped by. So we are reiterating once again our call to the international community to act responsibly. Valuable members of the press, during our meetings and discussions, we discussed Gaza, but at the same time Syria, Libya, Sudan, and the African Horn. And we found the chance of discussing all those regional matters. We have realized that we have similar targets and similar stance pertaining to many regional matters, and we have come to terms with Egypt to boost our correspondences. Hopefully from now on, we will be in closer cooperation with Egypt. With a win-win understanding, hopefully we will boost our bilateral relations. At the end of my remarks, once again, I hope and pray that our meetings and the agreements undersigned would be auspicious. Once again, I would like to thank His Excellency Mr. President and his valuable delegation, and without further ado, I would like to yield the floor to Mr. President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, and I would like to extend my best regards to the brotherly people of Egypt.
In the name of Allah, the Most Gracious, my brother, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the President of Turkey, I express in the beginning my high appreciation for your hospitality, and I assure that after first visit to Turkey, we establish a new phase of cooperation and completion between the two countries. And I tell the Turkish people that I have with me a message from Egypt and the Egyptian people with all sentiments of love and appreciation. We appreciate the historic relations and the cultural heritage between us. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last years, there was prosperity, continuous prosperity between the two countries, between the two peoples in Turkey and Egypt, in terms of the growing tourism and also the cultural and investment ties that are growing significantly, and the increase of the Turkish investments in Turkey. And we have genuine sentiments and desire to increase our relations and cooperation. And after the visit of President Erdogan to Egypt last February, I am happy with the presence of the President Erdogan in presiding the high-level strategic council between Turkey and Egypt to find a change in all levels, most of all in commerce and investment and agriculture and transport and other issues. And we've witnessed the signature of Memorandum of Understanding, which established a new phase between the two states. Our discussions also took the importance of facilitating the transport and enhance the free trade between the two countries, to exchange the commercial exchange to $15 billion in the coming years, in addition to enhance the investment between the two countries and granting facilitations for the Turkish businessmen. In this atmosphere of the distinguished atmosphere of investment in Egypt, to increase the activities in Egypt. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing in this region, in this part of the world of crises and challenges, prove that we need to highly exchange and coordinate, increase the coordination between Turkey and Turkey. And based on this, I discussed with his president, discussed how to overcome the regional crisis and most of all the humanitarian crisis in Gaza for the Palestinian brothers. This is unprecedented crisis that is going to be almost 1 year ongoing. We have the unified position of Turkey and Egypt that we need to end. We need to come to a permanent ceasefire and reach a permanent ceasefire and reach a level to achieve the aspirations of the Palestinian people with the independent state of the Palestinian people, with Al-Quds, the Eastern Quds, on the border of 1967. According to the international legitimacy. And we are continuing our cooperation since the beginning of the crisis to deliver the aid supplies to Gaza despite all challenges that are imposed by Israel. We also discussed the views about the Libyan crisis, and we agreed to increase the consultation to achieve the security and political stability in Libya, and we assured the end of the crisis in Libya in holding the legitimate parliamentary elections and ending the presence of the armed militias and foreign forces in Libya, and then the division in Libya will come to an end, and the stability in Libya will be established. Also, we discussed the situation in Syria, and we said we need to achieve to the crisis in Syria, which affected the Syrian people unprecedentedly. And I welcome the efforts of rapprochement between Syria and Turkey that could come to a political solution and mitigate the suffering of the Syrian people according to the Security Council resolutions, and with establishing and observing the sovereignty of Syria and the integrity of it. We also discussed the crisis in Sudan and the efforts exerted by Egypt in cooperation with different sides to achieve a ceasefire and reaching a political solution. And we also discussed extensively the situation in the African Ivory, and we said that we need to achieve the unity of Somalia against all challenges facing it. I assure that we are working to achieve the pacification in the east of the Mediterranean, to end the disputes between the countries in the region, and thus we are going to be able to reach the cooperation and invest and make use of the resources to achieve the prosperity for our peoples. And in the end, I thank my brother, President Erdogan, for the hospitality and the generous hospitality, and I am looking forward to host him again in Egypt to build and keep coordination and communication directly for the best of our two peoples and for the region as a whole. Thank you.
Well, that was the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan holding a joint media conference with his Egyptian counterpart, Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, the President of Egypt. There they are, shaking hands, following that conference and following the signing of some 20 or so new agreements between the two countries in an effort to boost trade and investment between the two countries. The target, they say there, to increase trade volume to $15 billion over the next few years. While our diplomatic correspondent Hassan Abdullah is standing by at the presidential complex in Ankara and joins us now live. Hassan, first of all, you're listening in to that joint conference there. What were your main takeaways in what each of the leaders said there?
Well, remember, we were talking about the leaders sending out the message that this meeting is going to prove to be instrumental in enhancing their relations. And this is precisely what they said. Now, of course, they talked about quite a lot. They covered many sectors. But the main message was about the strengthening of relations between the two countries. They've talked about the cultural relations and the historical relations the two peoples have had for hundreds of years. Now, of course, the means they're using for that, number one, trade. So when it comes to economic relations, They're talking about reaching the target of $15 billion of bilateral trade over the next 5 years. They've identified a number of areas. They're talking about cooperation in the energy sector, in transportation, education, cultural cooperation, tourism, defense, just to mention some of the areas where they're going to be cooperating. President Erdogan mentioned how Turkish businessmen have recently invested about $3 billion in Egypt, and also that there have been assurances that Egyptian businessmen are also going to be investing in Türkiye. They also talked about the situation in occupied Palestinian territories, particularly what's happening in Gaza. We heard them talk about the need to get the humanitarian aid, the much needed assistance to the people of Gaza, and the need for permanent peace. President Erdogan said that Israel continues with the slaughter of Palestinians, and Israel has even targeted those who were negotiators working for a ceasefire. But at the same time, he added that that is not going to break the will of the Palestinian people, who continue to show resilience. Now, President Erdogan was critical of some countries. He said that there are some countries that continue to provide unconditional support to Israel, and that those countries are also responsible in the slaughter of the Palestinians. He said that Türkiye has formally submitted its application to be a party to the ICJ genocide case, and that Türkiye is going to ensure that the case reaches a logical conclusion. Now, of course, we know that the two have also talked about a number of other issues, including the situation in Syria, neighboring Libya, where the two countries, so Türkiye and Egypt, have had a number of diverging views, but they've talked about how Egypt is concerned about the situation in its neighboring country, Libya, and how the two countries, Türkiye and Egypt, can work together. They've also discussed the situation in Sudan as well as in the Horn of Africa.
Okay, Hassan Abdullah from the presidential complex in Ankara, thank you so much for that insight. Well, let's get more analysis on this story. Betul Doğan Akkaş is an assistant professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Ankara University, and she joins us live now from the Turkish capital. Professor Betul, is this rapprochement with Egypt, is it a good strategic move for Türkiye, and why do you think that?
Thank you for inviting me, first of all. Definitely, the answer for your question is first and later. It's definitely a positive stage for Turkish regional politics and Turkish politics in terms of conflicts, but also for cooperative solutions in Middle East, including economic cooperation, trade relations, the import of and export of military equipments to Turkey and from outside of the Turkey. So in many ways, this is a positive stage, and what we see from their comments, actually, the two leaders are now in a position that they are more constructive than before. Even the visit in February, I could say there were even less positive narrative. Now we can see, including Libya, Syria, and other files that they haven't cooperated before, we can see more symbolic narrative in their closing remarks for the press release.
Certainly a wide range of areas they talked about, everything from health all the way, as you say, to wider regional relations with countries like Syria and Libya. What do you think will yield the most benefits for Türkiye in terms of these closer relations and these two countries working together more effectively?
So first, we need to mention this visit and the visit in February. They were not quick decisions. There has been communication between two parties in high levels, including intelligence sharing, security cooperation, since the problems started between the countries. This is why we could say these stages are made in a slow diplomatic move, but they have actually focused targets for Turkey and for Egypt. So first of all, as the Foreign Minister Fidan mentioned in his visit to Egypt this month, there's a security concern bringing these two parties together in Gaza, in Libya, in Horn of Africa, in the extended Middle East, if it is better to mention. And we could mention these two states are the critical actors of Middle East, and if they cooperate in a way to establish more solution-oriented dialogue in the Middle East, then they could also find a better way for their strategic cooperation, because there are some conflicts among them in their foreign policy making in Libya, in Horn of Africa, in Mediterranean, let's say, energy sales or maritime security issues. But these steps could bring more solution-oriented stages. And this is important for them, because if Turkey and Egypt are not beyond pragmatic economic cooperations, then there won't be any agency-oriented solutions to Middle East problems. This is what we need for a long-term cooperation and long-term peaceful Middle East politics. This is why, especially with the narrative of President Sisi, what I understand, he would like to, or maybe his country will be part of the talks between Turkey and Syria. There could be an Egyptian intervention in terms of instrumentalizing their role in this normalizing process with Assad of Syria. So I could say, from their narrative, what I understood is more active and also more sort of solution-oriented relations we could see between the parties in the coming year.
Okay, Betuldan Akash from Ankara University with that analysis on this visit and these agreements between the Turkish and Egyptian presidents. Thank you so much for joining us on TRT World. Well, just to wrap up what we've been talking about and looking at in the last half an hour, a visit from the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, to Ankara, the first visit since Mr. Sisi took power some 10 years ago, and it's the second visit between the two leaders, the second official state meeting between the two leaders this year, and it's signalling a rapprochement of relations between the two countries in the hope of building firmer ties and boosting trade and diplomatic relations, boosting trade to the tune of $15 billion. And that cooperation in terms of energy, in terms of trade, healthcare, defence, many sectors. And the two leaders also in that joint media conference discussing Gaza and the wider regional situation. Well, that is the news for now. I will be back at the top of the hour with more news and analysis. See you then. Bye-bye.